Mrs. J.D. Mowlin, and I think this is the most ridiculous thing that has ever happened. The Negroes are just as free as we are. They have the same opportunity to work and to build their part of the town up just the same as we have. I just don't understand it and don't approve of it. I'm going to stand up for my rights.
Thank you very much. Jim Knight with WALB Television News. We're soliciting the views of Albany people on the Civil Rights Bill. Would you like to give us your views?
Well, I think if they remain peaceful, it would be a lot better than perhaps the violence that was concerned. Well, of course, being a Southerner, I'm not for it at all.
I see.
And I just don't know how it's going to turn out. I hope we don't have any trouble.
We're soliciting opinions on the Civil Rights Bill. Would you like to give us yours?
I'm sorry, but I don't think it's the time right now. I think they have equal rights, though.
Thank you very much. Would you like to express your views?
No, I don't think so.
How about you?
Nope.
What I'd have to say wouldn't be fit to go on air.
Thank you very much.
I don't like it. I think you're just trying to put something on us that we don't want.
I see.
We ought to have a national election on it rather than just letting 9 men tell us what we got to do.
And how about you?
I feel the same.
Fine, thank you very much.
Well, I sure don't like it, that's for sure.
I see. Do you feel this will have any effect on your life directly?
I imagine it will.
Thank you very much.
I'm afraid we might have niggers to live next door to us.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about blacks.
All right.
Why are you running wait a minute, I want to go, my brother came back from the airborne in Vietnam, and he told me, and that of the bodies that he took out as a medical officer, he said, 50% of those guys were black kids. Served in the United States and Vietnam. This was it was a crack frontline unit, and these were American blacks who died in higher numbers for their country in Southeast Asia in that war than did white Americans, as a matter of fact, in the Vietnam War. Now, how can you be against a race which contains people who are out there fighting for their country just as much as white Christian Protestant Americans are?
That's something else that needs to be cleared up, Pat. We're not against the black race. We're not against, we believe in free enterprise for this country. We believe that everyone should have the same rights.
Well, Mr. Wizard, it says right here, wait a minute,
right
Mr.
now,
Wizard. Let me interrupt you for a minute, Mr. Wizard. It says right here, you believe in the final solution, which is black repatriation to Africa. Now,
Abraham Lincoln, but now look, I'm not going to be cut off in the middle
No, but I'm not going to be shut off either. You're running around on a bed sheet. I don't have the bed sheet. But I just want to tell you, I want to ask you this question. Can you imagine this country repatriating all the black Americans that Pat just spoke about to Africa?
No.
I mean, what kind of nonsense
No, I
is
can't.
that? Well, what are you saying it for then?
I'm not saying it.
Well, it says right here.
No, that's your paper. That's not my paper.
That's your paper. I took the quote and wrote it on this blue type.
That's not my paper. Now, to get back to it, now just a minute, I answered your question. Now, I want to finish what I was saying. We feel that affirmative action is discriminating against white people, and there is no question about it. Two wrongs don't make a right. Because black people were hurt and discriminated against in the past does not justify the discrimination against white people now. And we're asking for an end to that.
Look, I'm against reverse discrimination. I'm against racial quotas. I'm against affirmative action as it's practiced. But you said, when I introduced you, I didn't say that your organization was. I said historically to most Americans, you're anti-Catholic and anti-Semitic and racist. In other words, anti-black. You said, we're not anti-Catholic.
Right.
We're not anti-Semitic. You didn't deny the racist thing.
Well, it depends on your definition of racist. I'm a segregationist, okay? I believe that God has commanded me not to mix with other races.
Right.
For that reason, I want to have schools where I can send my children to a white school. I want to be able to go to my white neighborhoods, to white businesses,
all right.
for those things. So if that terms me as a racist, then I'm a racist.
Wait a minute, you can do that, but you can't have tax exemptions in your all-white school. And if it's a public school, now black kids whose parents' taxes pay for that school, they got a right to go to that neighborhood school. Now, if you want an all-white school, all-white academy, you can do that right now. You just don't get a tax exemption for it. So what's your complaint?
You say you can do that. Now, maybe I can, maybe you can, but what about the poor people that don't have the money to send their children to private schools? They can't. They're being deprived the right to practice their religion because they don't have the money to send them to a private school. There's no reason why in this great land of ours we couldn't have a three-tiered school system, a black school and a white school and an integrated school, and give everyone their choice. We would have much less dissension, we would have much less racial problems in the schools, And if those people that are seeking to integrate the races in this country really were seeking to do the best for both races, they would adopt this system and let integration proceed gradually.
Welcome to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Patrick Irvin. We are here breaking down these old videos. One from the 1950s with older white people being interviewed in Albany, Georgia, and the interview with the KKK Grand Dragon. I believe that's from the 70s. But old videos of white people being interviewed about their thoughts and feelings on the integration that was happening at the time. Well, they gave you their thoughts and their feelings. They did not want black people next to them. They did not want black people in their vicinities. They did not want black people in their schools, in their neighborhoods, nowhere around them. The KKK Grand Dragon was talking about, being able to have the separate schools for the separate races and separate people with ideas. Being able to, or one of the main themes is we don't want y'all to force black people upon us. All right, so that was the ground, or that was the foundation that was set. White people, we don't want black people in our vicinities. Integration happened. Now black people are in their vicinities. Integration happened. What have we gained? What do we have? Here are we now. We're in these white spaces. We're making this so-called progress, but we can't really help ourselves, even if disasters have happened. I'm here in Florida. Disasters are happening, right? So even in these spaces and even in these times, we can't really help ourselves. So, of course, we've talked about integration before, but we're talking about it from a different lens because we get to see the thoughts of certain white people who were in these spaces that were integrated. And of course, it was integrated against their will. So we want to look at the mindset of the white people who did not want integration, kind of break that down, why they didn't want integration, looking at the mindset of the black people who did want integration, but also looking at the long-term effects of integrating into white America. Of course, we know it didn't help us, but getting further into the details of how it's still not helping us today, like why it didn't help us then and how it's still not helping us today. So, Pat, since you got a hat on, I'm starting with you, my brother. I mean, you've seen these clips. Let's start with the clips first of the white people giving their thoughts. Like the first clip is somebody going up to white people in the shopping plaza, asking them about their thoughts on integration in the 1950s in Albany, Georgia. And you heard them with their replies. Like, what was going through your head when because I know you raw dog in this clip. So what was going through your head as you listening to this clip?
Crazy word.
The first thing I was thinking about was, how interesting it is that some of those people that were complaining about not being able to send their, all right, so we're going to start with the first clip. We're going to start with the second clip, but then I'm going to roll into the first clip because as he was talking about a three-tiered school system, I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about, like America has a school system in America, where, black people, the public schools and whatnot. But then what we don't often talk about is the Canadian school system and how the Canadian school system has created a lot of the new blacks that we see now today. And it's real interesting. You got Drake, right? You got the future president. I'm sorry, the person running for presidency. You got the Toronto Raptors, right? You got all right. I'm stop fucking around. I couldn't hold it. I had a whole point, but I couldn't hold it. I think it's foolishness, and this is why I say it's foolishness. It's not foolishness that they're saying it. It's foolish that in 2024, black people will hear that and be like emotionally impacted by it.
Of course they will.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but then the mere fact that, like, if you listen to so there are a few tiers here. With the white ladies, it's interesting because this was also filmed in the time where white women were alleged to have no voice.
Right.
No opinions, no voice, no freedom to speak, no thought, no control over their agency or anything. And yet here you had in a number of situations white women articulating their opinions, the same white women that have stepped their what is it, their Gucci red bottoms over the line and become the arbiters of moral justice. Those same white women who try to say that it was white men and they didn't have a voice and they didn't have a say, saying these things, and then they were saying these things in front of their white men, even to the point where, and then another thing, the white dude that was asking the question asked the white husband and then turned and asked the white woman as if his opinion did not also count for her opinion. It's amazing. It's almost like that video was not shot in the 1960s and 50s and 60s and was instead shot in 2024 and rendered in black and white, because how dare these white women have opinions?
Well, white women had enough of a voice back then to make sure black men get lynched. So,
right, but I'm just saying, we talking about the narratives, right? Like, this is how white women have managed to insulate themselves from criticism by saying we didn't have a voice. That was white men doing all of that. That wasn't us. And yet, from the books that talk that discuss white women suing their husbands after divorce to retain ownership of slaves that they owned prior to the marriage, to women actually owning slaves without being married. You have all of these narratives out here that show that white women had influence, power, and agency, but they've managed to trick the vast majority of the American public into thinking that they had no influence and no say. So I found that to be really interesting. When you move into the, and then it's also interesting too, black people, that yes, white women didn't like you either. I don't know when black women and white women became best friends, but I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that just 50 years ago, they outwardly, publicly did not like you. It was overt.
Well,
So,
I mean that friendship is a one-way street. Let's be honest.
It is, but I think
it's an illusion of allegiance with black women and white women, because.
But I think we need to call attention to it every chance we get.
Yeah. It does need to be, but they need to understand, and people need to understand, white women aren't friends with black women like that, in mass like that, and white women not riding for black women like that. White women have been using black women for gains for as long as they could, but black women have to understand that.
Yes, because white women ain't friends with no other woman.
Right. She's the only person that the white woman is down for is the white man, no matter how he treats her, because there's always benefits for her.
And for all of the other technical tests that are stuck on level 2 or 3 thinking, yes, we understand that there are individuals out there that are not like that. We're speaking in generalities. Okay. So to the other thing, though, to the Klan member, I always find it interesting that people want to talk to Klan members until the Klan members start talking. Like, they never want to let them finish.
Yeah, I knew you was gonna hit on that. I knew that.
Yeah, they never want to let them finish. They're terrified of what they might say. They're scared that they might actually agree with what they might say, and then they're scared that what they might say might actually make sense. Because if there was no fear there, you would let the man talk himself out, and then you would slowly and methodically deconstruct his points and rip him to shreds. You don't even let the man he got half a point out.
You got on the bed
sheet down his throat. Right.
You the one with the bed sheet on running around.
And even that, it shows just how early white men were gaslighting each other. So we can even say there's nothing happening right now that white men were not at the forefront of. And I think that's something else that needs to be acknowledged in terms of negative interactions between groups of people. And not just white men, because I think white men learned how to gaslight from white women. Because white men get gaslit in their relationships with white women all the time. So I think that's one of the things that we work on here. But then when you start talking about what he was actually saying, as somebody that thinks that integration did more harm than good, I personally didn't have a problem logically with the points that he was expressing. Emotionally, that's a different. We understand intentionality and all these other things come into play, and we know he was playing games with words.
Yeah, equal.
But
He throwing equality and all those things. He's saying
right.
equality.
But if we, and we can dig into all of that because, and I want to say that I understand he's playing games with words, but on the face value of it, and this is what makes it dangerous, and I will bring this into conversations about the modern election. Understand how people can say one thing and mean another. You can recognize it when somebody wearing a bed sheet does it. Why can't you recognize it when somebody wearing a suit and a black wig does it? And that's not a shot at Kamala, because I don't think she has a wig on, but it does apply to Kamala because she does talk out of both sides of her neck.
Yeah. PC.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you with me?
Yes, sir.
Man, what are your, so you hear the people in Albany, Georgia in the first clip. They hear the Klan, that from my understanding, that's the Grand Dragon. I forgot what his name was. That's Grand Dragon of the KKK in that interview. You heard what all the white people, even the ones who was looking like they were trying to be allies, they were all them saying. What are your thoughts on like the questioning, the answers, and the conversations around integration at this time? Because it look like we're looking at a 20-year span between the 50s and the 70s.
Well, the 50s was, I believe, it was 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. I think that's what their response was to, because that's technically the end of segregation. So, and just gauging, some of the talking points of it, they just needed to say, listen, we don't like black people. We don't like, and a few of them wanted to say it, but they tried to be as politically correct as the times would allow. But, talking about, they can build up their own side of town. Well, prior to that, and 50 years prior, when black people did build up their own side of towns, jealous white folk came through, and there was a white woman that actually said that, I believe, but white women cried grape, and which led to lynchings and which led to those towns being burnt down. We got Rosewood, that's down in y'all neck of the woods in Florida. You had Tulsa, everybody knows about Tulsa. Also had Galveston, Texas. So, and amongst many other towns, because the list goes on. Complaining about the fact that they don't want trouble. It's amazing to me that the people that throw rocks don't want you to throw rocks back at their glass house.
Hey, man.
So they didn't want trouble, but they're the only ones allowed to hit you or hurt you or harm you or maim you. But when it happens to them, is we don't want, you guys, we get to determine how you move and how you and basically we get to tell y'all what to do.
Well, yeah, because we're in charge.
Yeah, and you Negros need to stay in your place.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was a very interesting take on the whole concept, but that's what self-righteous people do. And this concept of power is not given, it's taken. And so that would have been a nice time for black people to try to actually work together with other parts of other black communities and other townships, instead of just having pride in building their one township up. Because when it came to tearing those black townships down, white folk utilized their networks and they converged on those towns, and people from out of town took part in the burnings and, chasing the women and the children into the woods and into the rivers and into the, the swamplands down there, and digging ditches to bury all the bodies and steal the land and property. So I thought that was an interesting take. And I'm not surprised by it. I just wish more people would be honest about how they are. And I agree with Patrick, for black people to be always shocked or feel like they're emotionally bothered by these claims, it just shows that, for one, I think it's fake outrage for the most part. because deep down we already know it. So you just want a reason to be appalled, and you got one. They're going to give you one.
Yeah,
Now,
condition to be appalled.
Right. So it's like we just conditioned to react. And so when you think about and the concept of white women gaslighting this conversation, because I can see a lot of the men being upset about it, but I can see the women in their ear beating it down to them. You're going to let these Negros come through here? What are you going to do, Harold? What are you going to do, Harold? You know, I can see that happening in their houses and stuff. And you're not a man, and this, that, and the other, and keep poking the bear. And a lot of
the liberals.
Right. Yeah. And here's the thing about the concept, because I thought about what Pat said too about the how black women, because this is at the time now, 1954. This was at the time where black women were feminist. They were being recruited to be feminist in the 50s, 40s, and the 50s. But even the feminist marches were segregated at the time. The black women had to walk in the back on these marches, and they willfully took their place. And you have to ask yourself why. And then you go back to Sojourner Truth in the 1800s.
Am I a woman?
Am I a woman? But even in that Am I a Woman speech, she said she didn't want black men to gain the rights of property, to gain the rights of voting and things of that nature, because they would just assume the roles of white men. You know, that was her implicit bias against. So what it came down to is white women and black women, white women have never respected black women for the main purpose of the fact that they saw, but they both shared anti-black male misandry. And that was their tether, that was their tie. And so, and I'm talking about the feminist. So just, you know, I know how, you know, people just, like we just said.
You don't like black women. Well, everybody know you don't like black women, man. They ought to know about that, man. And
hey,
right there.
Hey, man, you know, another rock on the bar, another you know, strip on the Barbie, man. So but so when I hear that, I just, you know, it makes me, you know, I just step back and look at things now, because I'm kind of a protagonist now. When I look at a lot of the stuff that's going on, I don't have a reaction to it. Like, I just think about it, and then I process it, and then I move past it. But I just I just see that. I mean, sorry about that. If you look at if you look at what's going on in all the in social media and things of that nature, I mean, even when George Floyd was you know, deleted, you had groups of sisters talking about how black men were what do they call them, bullet bags, and how nothing impressed them more than to see white men assert their dominance over black men than police brutality. You know, so I mean, take that up with them. Don't come to me. Take that up with them, because they're the ones who's selling the image. You know, don't get mad at me for pointing out what's going on, because you're not strong enough to address the ones that's doing it unless you're somehow complicit in it. But then the Klansman is funny, because
let me talk.
Well, what he was about to say was that strategy to deport all black people was Abraham Lincoln's, and that's what they didn't want him to say. They didn't want that, because at the time they were selling Abraham Lincoln as the great emancipator. At that particular time in history, Abraham Lincoln was a friend to the black community, and nobody had really studied a lot of the things that Abraham Lincoln was saying in his speeches. Abraham Lincoln was as anti-black as any other Klan president that you've ever seen, and he was definitely, if he had not been taken out in that theater that day, his next move was to send black people back to Africa, specifically Liberia, which was created for the exportation of black people.
Well, that's one of the great things about the clip, and both clips combined. If we really talking about being able to look at the many elements and the many levels that are in these clips, because like you're saying, he cut them off from talking about Abraham Lincoln being the architect or being behind deporting black people back to Africa. Even your great emancipator did not want you here. So, okay, now we have to start taking a better look at who we view as allies and who we want to honor and who we want to look at as heroes. Because, yeah, in conjunction with talking about how black women have the fantasy about white women being their ally, Black America has a fantasy about white liberals being their allies.
Can I say something about that too, Joe, real quick before you go to the next part? Because white women have been telling black women for the last decade and a half that your issues are non-issues and we don't take you seriously. There was a serious Twitter war that went on in the in about like 2011, 2012, and so forth, where black women were saying they don't like the fact that white women don't support their causes, and white women were literally telling them, shut your face. This, you can go back and screenshot some of these conversations. So the only time white women jump on these cases is when they get to double down on black men.
Well, to be an ally means that you have to just be against white men. It doesn't mean that you have to be for black people. It just means you don't even have to be against white men like truly. You just have to talk against white men because, hey, remember, one of the narratives is that white men are the issue. White men are the racists. Well, that first clip show you, and other clips that I've watched, because with the first clip, that's one of the best ones that I found. But I watched like 3 or 4 other videos of people, white people, talking about their thoughts and feelings on integration. And white people don't want to align themselves with black people. Now, white liberals, they portray themselves as the ones who are going to align with black people, but they are the sheep in wolf clothing as well. So you got the left, I mean, the right wingers, the far right or the start right, who are just like, yeah, we're bears, we're gonna bite your face off. The idea we racist, or even the classical idea of the Republicans are the racist party. The Republicans are the ones that want to do you harm, right? So whether you want the death by 1,000 cuts, or you want the sudden impact, because we've said this before, say it again, this is what we're dealing with this. But like those 2 interviewers, the way they're yelling at Buddy, okay, all right, but that doesn't mean that you actually down for us because you cutting them off and stuff and saying he wear a bed sheet. That doesn't really mean that you down for us. What are your actions?
He also agreed with him that he didn't like affirmative action.
Right.
Yeah, and that's part of the double talk. And I want to go back just a bit because I think you guys hit on something really good when you talked about Sojourner Truth and the Ain't I a Woman. Because like the original speech, when was the original speech given? In like the 1850s, right?
Mm-hmm. Something like that, yeah.
Right after the original speech was given, like I want to say within a few weeks, one of her friends, a black guy, transcribed it for a Negro newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't I a Woman was never mentioned in his recollection, his recording of the event.
Right.
Another man published the speech later that basically agreed with the black guy's recollection of this speech. I want to say like a decade later, a white woman, a decade later, a white woman published the speech, and all of a sudden, every other line was "Ain't I a Woman?"
Yep.
And that became the recognizable piece of the speech. And I think that's so brilliant and so great that both of you guys brought that up, because it just showcases yet again white women have been doing this thing to utilize black women in their campaign for power when they got tired of having indirect access to power and decided they wanted direct power.
Yep.
And black women became the tool they used because of the struggle of black people. But you can't elevate, as as white women are concerned, They couldn't just utilize the struggle of black people. They had to have that group kinship, woman to woman. I can point at her struggle and say that it's like mine and make my struggle seem worse.
Yeah.
So I think that's even better. Yeah, I think that point is another one of those points that needs to be hammered home, because you're talking about this in 19. So we going all the way back to like the 1850s, where they're already, where they're already poisoning the well. The 1863, 1864, where they're already starting to utilize in public fashion, rewrite and insert words that were never used. And then we move on 100 years later. Now we're talking about 1954. They're beginning to do this thing. 1964, they're having these things going on. Then you move into 1974, where you drop the Combahee River Accord, right? Where they said if we can liberate black women, right? We can liberate black women, then we'll end sexism and racism, because black women suffer from both. So let's make them the ultimate martyr, and then let's deepen our connection to them by making their struggles as women more important than their struggles as black people. And so it gets to be this real interesting game that you see them playing over time. And I just thought it was wonderful that you guys, I know y'all was riffing, but that y'all riffed in that direction. I thought that was brilliant.
So 1851 is when she gave the speech. Like I said, it wasn't the Ain't I a Woman speech. So they said Marcus Robinson was the man who republished the speech in 1852. And Frances Gage is the white lady who added Ain't I a Woman in it. And the Frances Gage version was published in 1863.
Yeah, and that's something I think that's very important to understand, is that and this is the thing why a lot of sisters are angry with me, because I point out the fact that a lot of sisters have been manipulated to move in certain directions, and at a certain point they understood it and they co-signed it because they felt like they were getting something out of it. And this is too why the community has, and that is struck twofold. One, it maintained manipulative controls over black women. Remember the last 2020, the Democratic Party championed black women for being the backbone of democracy and the heroes of the 2020 election and so forth. And what it does is it creates a buffer class, another buffer class, but one that has a severely low glass ceiling. And it maintains them in place, but it also pits them against, the men of their community, which is us. And so those are things I typically point out, because we're talking about allies and allegiances. We don't have an allegiance in our own community right now. And that is one of the things that, I talk about and point to in regards to, if we're going to fix everything, like, what's the sister's name? Shahrazad Ali, the elder, stated we need to examine the roles of our sisters in terms of why, for their part, and why the community is dysfunctional today. And so I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. And no, this is not a gaslighting conversation. It's not a conversation for anybody to, be up in arms with just because we're asking the question. The thing is similar to this whole election. If you can stand on it, then why can't we question you on these points that you say you stand on? Now, I'm directly talking about the vice presidential candidate who cannot function, or is not allowed to function without cue cards and projectors and screens that are telling her what to say and what she can and cannot say, and we're not allowed to question it. The same thing, goes for the lack of connectivity within our community. How come we're not allowed to question why certain things are functioning the way they are?
Well,
and go ahead, John.
Go ahead. Finish up.
I was just, and because once we are able to do that, then we can get over this hurdle and what's keeping the community back. Because if we looked at anything in history, we've seen that there is a constant push to make sure that black men and black women are divided over a lot of different issues. And for
Well,
the longest, it was about berating black men.
so this takes me back to message to the grassroots, because I just put up the last piece. I dropped the last piece on Tuesday of the message to the grassroots speech, and I broke it up in pieces for a reason, so we can kind of digest it in chunks and really think about what Malcolm is saying. And you know, Malcolm is going in on the black leaders who are pushing integration. He says there's a black revolution and a Negro revolution. The black revolution, led by Dr. King and such others who want to integrate into the white society. And so with this integration into the white society, we lost our power. Well, we lost any semblance of anything that we was building for ourselves. We lost it. We let it go, right? And so, yes, we didn't have equal rights, because that's one of the things that they were trying to, especially in the first video, they was trying to make it seem like black people had equal rights with white people in the 1950s. And they also mentioned that black people must remain peaceful and don't start no trouble, right? So 1950s, this is the climate of the people that we're trying to integrate into, right? And so we're being integrated into this system by black leaders, but what's the incentive for them to integrate us? Because now we're going in and have to bring in the ideas and the thought process around these talented 10th or these leaders who benefit from the proximity to whiteness. Because it was such a great push to have this close proximity to whiteness. And we see overall, it did not benefit black people, but some black people did benefit from that and still are benefiting from the proximity to whiteness because of their allegiance to white folks. So that's another thought process, and that's another conversation to come up in this, is not only seeing that these people did not want, like they did not want black people in their spaces, but you had these leaders who were pushing so hard for black people to be in these spaces, just for us to not really have nothing to show for it, really, other than black people being able to have quote unquote success in white spaces, which in turn still enhance the white spaces, but enhances the individual black and not the whole of black people.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember when we're having these conversations that we are in effect still talking about two separate countries. He was interviewing people in the South, and I think it's important for people in the South to understand that there was still racism in the North. Like the South didn't have a monopoly on racism.
Right. Yes.
Matter of fact, early stages of the Civil War, escaped slaves were returned to their slave owners by Union soldiers.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to remember that.
And left to die. I mean,
right.
The famous story about what's the lake down there in Georgia, off the coast of Georgia? There was a lake where the peaches. But it was a bunch of blacks who were free, were there was no plantation for them, so they locked them in this prison camp and left them there to die. And so I'm trying to remember the name of it, but and they say, you grow the sweetest peaches, but nobody eat them because of the ground that was saturated with the blood of those dead people, of those dead Africans or black people. And when you think about the push for it, I don't think you have to go any further than the fact that black people were starting to make money. And the same year, 1954, it's ironic that you have Brown versus the Board of Education and also a documentary by the United States Department of Commerce talking about how to sell the Negro and ways to incorporate black people into the economic markets down there, because black people will spend money. I mean, they even broke it down. Like, black people love name brands and they love looking good, and they take pride in spending money on stuff. And it's amazing because the ish is still working, but you think about the economic impact of bringing black people in to into these places where they didn't have access to black capital because black folk weren't allowed to buy in white stores at that particular time. So they saw where that money was going. They saw the building of all these black towns prior to. So they pushed towards that. Now, the talk that they're saying is that they were afraid of a second civil war. Black people have never been in a place where they wanted another war.
Yeah. So you think that it's a good assumption that black so-called leaders of the time had personal incentives to help white people further destroy what black people had built through integration, which is a more subtle tactic rather than just going and burning your stuff down. Just convince you to just come on over and sell your stuff and be a part of ours. But there has to be an incentive for those people to encourage the integration. So
yeah.
I don't.
Go ahead, Pat. Yeah.
Oh no, he asked you a question.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, first of all, the black leaders you've always had some in the pocket in this country. Give them a little butter biscuit, give them a piece of chicken. You know what I'm saying? They became the de facto leaders of the plantation, and that led to other things. The black people who didn't subscribe to that, well, they didn't live too long. So, there were messages being passed, and we got to remember, man, the institution of slavery worked for what it was designed to do. It created the Negro. It created the nigger. Right. You know what I'm saying? So we feel like we would be the ones that when Harriet came to the plantation or John Horse came to the plantation, we'd be like, all right, we out. We either going north or we going south, but we're leaving here, right? We gotta remember, man, a lot of people stayed, and a lot of people and now are descendants of those who willfully stayed on the plantation. After the Civil War, black people still went back to some of those plantations like, yo, I need a job. I don't know nothing else. Right. Yeah. So
neo-slavery.
Yeah. So when you see that, and the majority of blacks would have stayed in the South if it wasn't for the fact that, you had a lot of lynchings going on. That's why you had a lot of the so-called hobos and things of that nation with the Great Northern Migration. Going north. Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, you needed jobs, but also, it was some terrorism going on in your neighborhood. By them, them same red-shirted, red Klan. It was a lot of that going on. And the epigenetic memory of all that still streaks terror in black people.
Yeah.
About an angry white person, it streaked the terror. And I mean, you think about because the question that I have is, knowing what we know, why can't we go off and build our own towns? Why can't we go off and do our own things now? Those are some of the questions I have, but I don't want to get off to that point because I know Pat was going to also talk on this.
I think it goes back to, there was a paper written in, I think it was the 1820s. Anyways, it talked about those traits that are inborn versus inbred, those traits that are natural to black people in America versus those traits that have been bred into us. And I think that's a very interesting conversation because we have to begin to acknowledge the difference between how we've responded to the trauma, the adaptations that we've developed socially, and what was reinforced because it was already there. I think black people's affinity for social status has just been there.
Yeah.
You think about the way black cultures developed. They developed in a land where the things that you needed were available. So, the things that made you stand out became of value when it came to asserting your position in society. So, we see this in societies where the culture groups develop in scarcity. And the leaders in those culture groups, oftentimes they have the biggest stores of food, but by and large, they still look like the commoners. Like they
Mhm.
still dress like them, they still talk like them, they still live like them. They just have more of what everybody else wants. And then you go into black cultural societies, at least the ones that we like to think we come from, and no, like there's a clear difference between the average person and a person with high social standing. You have the fancy clothes, you have the jewelry, you have all of these other things that makes me stand out. We all eating, but you ain't eating like I'm eating. You ain't wearing it like I'm wearing it. You ain't doing it like I'm doing it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's something that we have to pay attention to. The I think when it comes to the black leaders, I don't think black leadership made a conscious decision to sell out the black community, if that's the phrasing we want to use for it. I think what ends up happening is the black people that have long vision usually aren't listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are short-sighted are. And we got to think about that. Why is that? Because it's easy to listen to somebody that's telling you, if you follow me, tomorrow will be better than today. Well, I want to go with him. I don't want to listen to the dude that said, look, if you go with me, you might starve. It's going to be hard. It's going to be rough. Some of your kids might die. But in about 30, 40 years, we're going to be way better, like much better. Just give me 30, 40. We'll all look at that dude like, yo, what did you, why would I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then tomorrow comes and it is better, but 30, 40 years from now,
it's not.
We was better off where we started. And so I think that's what we keep getting psyched into, that loop of following. Well, it feels good to move like this. Well, that's cool. But sometimes you like, that's what's called being a mature adult, being able to delay gratification, being able to understand that just because it feels good doesn't mean that it's good for you. And just because it's good for you right now doesn't mean that it's going to be good for you in the future. And I think as a black community, we haven't culturally matured to a point where we can recognize those leaders and follow them. And I will say this, I don't know that that's a specifically black community thing. That might be a human thing. But because black people exist in the conditions and the environments that we exist in, we can't afford to let, I say this all the time, black people in America aren't a natural people. So we can't afford to allow nature to take its course. We got to intervene.
Got to do something. We got to do something fast.
Yeah. That's a very important point. That's a very important point, because we keep pointing back to Africa. And the sad part is, no, we have African blood in us, African ancestry, but black people in America are a new race of people. And we have to acknowledge that, because as this new race that was actually concocted out of, not of our own volition, now we kind of got to, like, we've been wobbling and all this. We got to get our balance and get our bearings on, because we can't do what other nations do. We have to be the discipline, more discipline. We don't have the safety net of culture or the bloodlines that'll protect us. Because you think that, I mean, if that was the case, African nations would have been over here on our behalf. If that was the case, that's not happening. Well, it's not that even that they can't. They just recognize that they've often said it. You are not us. You know what I'm saying? And we're the ones that simply tend to have to carry that water, carry the bucket for that. But that's mostly when you hear when you you talk to Native Africans and so forth. Like, you have very few that be like, you're my brother, you're my sister, blah blah blah. But for the most part, like I said, the countries themselves, first, they can't even stand on their own 2 feet right now, to be honest with you. But there would have been a call, there would have been a mission, there would have been boats in the water to come back to get us if that was the case. So we do have to see it from that perspective. Now that we have to see it from that perspective, because I like what Patrick was talking about in terms of like the view. It's like black people in America feel like, listen, man, we need a quick solution. That's why you always say, listen, if we stop spending money on this particular day, we'll impact the system. And then we can go back to partying, or we can go back to, a leisure life, or this and the other. When we talk to most black people, they want the leisure life. They want a life of leisure. And then so the peacock is who they listen to because he's the fastest route to that life of leisure. Now, you look at situations like currently, like what y'all dealing with right now. What y'all both are dealing with right now. And y'all both literally are ground zero for all this stuff that's in the news right now concerning these hurricanes in the South. Helena, and what's the next one? Milton coming.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? Down in North Carolina, Pat, you still driving past houses with trees on them. You know what I'm saying? That you know, Joe, every 2 minutes, somebody's telling y'all to brace for not just hurricanes, but tornadoes too that come with the hurricanes. You know what I mean? My computer always doing something silly. So the thing is, what you see going on down there is it's funny too, right? The black towns are the last ones to get service. We touched on it last week, but Pat was like, what, 6 days without power? 5-6 days? Right. Without power, watching all the towns around him get power. Now, the one township he lives in is predominantly black. All the other ones are not. But what's making the news right now? Ainsville. Was it Asheville? Asheville, North Carolina is making the news right now. And it's making the news right now because white people are coming together and they're making it news. Not even people from there. Now you think about what was like the Ainsville of our time would have been Katrina. Katrina didn't get the attention it deserved because at that particular time, nobody really cared that black people were floating in the water and alligators were just snatching their bodies. Even here in Philadelphia, the black radio station, it was Q102, was talking about New Orleans being the new Atlantis, making jokes about the fact that the city was underwater. That's what I'm talking about when we say black people got to start caring about black people. And American blacks have to really start understanding the need, the desperation, the situation we're in. Because in townships, and Joe, we talked about this earlier, if we even create townships with black people, we got to even make sure the black people that come in have a high caliber. Because I'm tired of going outside every day and seeing somebody trying to break into my damn car.
Well, those would be different. Those would be black people, though. You know, actual black people. But you know, I said about the incentives for the black leaders because even like I hear your point about the prestige, but even that in itself is an incentive for black people to want to do what they want to do, for white people to push the white agenda, to push the white mindset. But looking at what drives black people to want to be in white spaces, to push white agendas, to push white ideas. All right, now looking at the long term, connecting to what you're talking about, PC. So we have all these disasters that are happening. Like I'm in Florida. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. Hurricane Adley. Milton is supposed to hit about 2:00 this morning. We're still reeling from what Helene did, and people are still reeling from the hurricane that happened last year, especially the path that Helene took, right? And so by the time Helene got to Valdosta, Georgia, to Albany, Georgia, it was a Category 2, but it still wreaked havoc from Albany on up through the Carolinas, right? And so all black, a predominantly black township. So you live in a predominantly black township, but the people don't have the black mindset. That's one of the residual results of integration is, well, we operate as individuals and we want to be a part of this society. So we got to have the mindsets of this society. Now, we do want to be around our people, but we still operate and think like white people. So we're around each other, but we're not a collective. We just around each other because it's almost synonymous to what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talks about when she analyzes what she calls the survival unit versus what a family is supposed to be. Because a family should be able to protect, provide, and empower rather than just surviving, which is the survival groups that Black people create, because we're not creating families, we're creating survival groups. We don't do what we need to do for ourselves. We're going to continue to be survival groups, survival communities, survival society, survival whatever. Because yeah, we could be a nation. We could be a nation. I mean, we got enough people, we got the income, we have the minds, we have all these things, we have the skill sets to actually be a nation. But what we don't have is that mindset of true nation builders, of people who have been in America this long, who need to see ourselves. We know we need to see ourselves as one. Like, we know that, but we aren't doing that because of the programming. And the programming said, well, you're supposed to operate as an individual because that's where your success lies. And your success lies on the white side of the railroad track rather than the Black side. So here's your incentive.
I think one of the challenges we run into is we go again into like what's human and what's Black. And I think one of the things we have to accept, and I love the analogy of survival unit versus family unit. I think when you really dig down, though, humanity is only we're only social creatures because it's required to survive. The moment you give somebody enough resources to survive on their own, they disconnect.
Ratopia. Yeah.
Yeah, so that begins to paint the picture of, okay, well, if the only reason we're social is because we need to be to survive, then what is the best version of humanity? Is it the version where everybody has all their needs met? Because we know that version is going to result in stratification. Like, people are going to go their own way. If I don't need you and you don't need me, there's no reason for us to work together through disagreements. The moment we have one, bye, Felicia. And so so for Black people, I begin to think, because we always talk about upwards mobility, and this, that, and the third. But then I think about it, like, people in the hood, the reason, and for those people that ain't in the hood, like, you don't really understand the camaraderie that exists in the hood. I know it's hard to fathom that when all you see on the news every day is hood people beating each other up and killing each other.
Yeah.
But there is, at least in the hoods I grew up in. Let me caveat it that way.
Well, back in our days when we were coming.
Right. That's why I said let me caveat it that way, because the people in the hoods nowadays, from what I've seen, their existence, they have a lot more resources than we had. So I'll say that. So, but it speaks even to the point, though. The camaraderie that existed back in my day was because you needed to be nice to your neighbor, because you needed somebody to either watch your kids or give you a bag of chicken when you ain't have it. It was survival. You needed it. So they did something crazy cool. I'm gonna let that ride. And I know it sounds crazy to say that, but that is what's driving all of this deep down, like this need to survive. So, but then what happens when you get a bunch of people, you give them a bunch of money, you give them a bunch of houses and a bunch of land? All of a sudden, the neighborhood units are not a neighborhood unit no more. It's a collection of nice homes.
Yep.
And so I begin to wonder, like, have we set a unrealistic goal for ourselves as a Black community?
Yep.
When we say we need to start thinking about ourselves as a family unit, because as humans, the only way the family unit works when it's differentiated from the survival unit, the only way family works is when it's in survival mode.
Well, that's why we're not going to give up the comforts to go into survival mode, because we're going to have to give up the comforts to go into survival mode to spur that need for that family unit, for that survival as one.
Well, there is another route, but it's a lot more uncomfortable. It requires us to elevate our culture.
Mm-hmm. Wow, hold on, Pat. Hold on, Pat. You mean we have to stop being low, like we have to not allow to be the baseline of how we deal with each other? See Joe just quietly sitting here right now.
Right, and that's I started laughing because he Joe, you
No,
gotta
but
leave
but,
that
but
part
that's
in.
a great question. But it still plays in the part of what I'm saying, because we're gonna have to choose to do
Absolutely.
better. We're gonna have to choose to
Absolutely.
be better. We're gonna have to choose to work together. We're gonna have to choose to say, you know what? Yeah, this next day plan is amazing, because tomorrow's going to be a whole lot better than today, and that's great. But this is not for us. This is for our tomorrow, because we're building a better tomorrow. So we have to take the 35-year
That ain't
plan.
gonna resonate though, Joe.
I know, but that's the answer. And until we are ready to take that road, let's travel to take that hard road, we're gonna continue to be here. And we're still trying to force ourselves into spaces that people don't want us. Even in 2024, people are getting mad because white people are rejecting the DEI. You would too. If black, like, come on, man, you can't tell me black people who own a black company that's a predominantly or all black company will let some white person come in and diversify their company. Come on.
That's why I said I agree with, on face value, purely logically, I agree with the Klansman.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is we're telling our people they need to elevate their culture to the point that they can move in an opposite direction of their humanity.
You know, the funny part about that is, and it was what we were talking about prior to the show, and I think it applies here. And we were talking about our experiences with women, and we were talking about how dealing with women who don't.
Y'all were talking about, not Patrick. Go ahead.
I was talking about. I'll take all the heat. I'll take all the smoke. All right. So the conversation was more so about when she does not feel like she qualifies for you, she will sabotage the relationship and deal with a man of lesser quality. Not saying that he's not a good man, but he's not you. And I think a lot of black people don't feel as though they qualify culturally to actually elevate the way we operate and move amongst each other. And so therefore we sabotage those situations. I mean, look at all, like, and you can even take like the basketball players, the rappers from the hood. What do they say? I'm doing this because I need to make a better life for my family, this, that, and the other. Then they get rich, and what happens? They get more entrenched into the gang warfare. You know what I'm saying?
No. They say I need to do this so I can get rich and buy my mama a house specifically.
Well, even that, but do they buy their mama a house? Because most of them, they still be that, they still down the way.
But it's even the mindset behind that shows the breakdown of the black family, because you have a lot of these cats who come from a 2-parent household who will still say, I have to buy my mama a house.
Well, yeah, that part too. But I think it goes back to what you was also talking about, Joe. Black people are going to be in a place that they have to survive. We're going to have to get together for survival, or we're going to perish. And you would have thought that 2016 would have been that, when everybody was terrified because, Trump was going to put us back in slavery, and the shackles and the chains were just around the corner. And you had, I don't know how many phone calls and messages y'all got, but I heard of a slew of black folk that were moving to Canada or talking about moving out of the country, and like, you know what I'm saying?
Move to Canada street.
Right. Like they was at the border.
Right. Yo, they outside. The last bag is packed in the car, and the engine's running. So, and yet all Negroes, don't think I forgot about that, because I remember that very well. But when people realized that it wasn't going to be fire and brimstone and that they can actually survive, black people fell back in line. And that's the thing. You know what I'm saying? black people right now, and I don't know whether or not it's the calcified pineal glands from drinking all of the fluoridated and poisoned water and lead pipe water. I don't know what it is. All the fried chicken. I don't know what it is, but for some strange reason, we can't get black people on that page to see that, we need to start getting along, building with each other, and to the point where and not support these charlatans. Because even in the so-called black conscious community, which, shout out to my brother, made a post today about, I'm not even gonna put him out there, but I emphasize what he says in regards to dealing with regular black people and not these conscious cats out. Anyway, so
you talking about Umar?
No. I'm not. Stop that.
Oh, he pushed the school date back.
Jesus, Joe.
See.
I mean, hey, he pushed the school date back again, 2025.
So I'm not even following that, so I don't know. But God
yeah, I said it.
So the point I'm making is these conscious Negroes are in the way. And what I mean by that is, they have sullied this whole concept of what it means. So you got the same way we talk about the black leaders who led our people astray, because they felt as though they were going to be, glorified in some way or into with the white community and so forth. And they were being paid a lot of money, because we don't talk about that part, but they became very wealthy. Many of them,
incentives,
right? So now the incentive is social capital. So, and a lot of these brothers that are out there, they do it because the women clamor to them, and so now they got 4 or 5 women in their harem. A lot of the sisters are chasing those same brothers because they want the status of being with that man, or being with those men, and so. But nobody's doing it for the sake of the community, and so you have people. We don't even have the guts or the chutzpah to say, listen, we're not going to cut your head off, but we need to you need to leave us alone. You know what I'm saying? We need several people to be excommunicated from the community because they don't serve a purpose. And so those folk are the main ones that are that like Pat said, they're the ones selling you the dream it's going to happen tomorrow.
Like
it's going to happen tomorrow, right? And
Joe, you gonna move to Philly?
Nah, I'm staying here. I'm staying here. I ain't going to Philly no time. So I like Florida. Fight the hurricane.
Okay.
So
it just sounded familiar. My bad. FDMG is coming.
Yeah, you gonna move to Philly. Yeah.
He's coming for the weekend. Wow, man. So anyway,
silly, man. that dude's silly.
I forgot what the hell I was going to say.
You're talking about these bad followers, and with following the charlatans within the conscious community.
Well, right, and so that's what they choose to listen. Because, and it's funny, right? Because I got into it with my cousin a couple of days ago, and I shared y'all some of the stuff that was going on, and she was saying more so like, what are y'all plans for now? Since y'all keep critiquing, I'll keep critiquing the current status quo in terms of the liberal leadership. And I said, well, my plan was the Independence Day project. After I laid down all the things that I had done, my resume is quite impressive. I ain't gonna lie. That was just in Philadelphia. But I said, my plan was the Independence Day project. Our plan was the Independence Day project. So You know, y'all talk about Project 2025. I said, had we been doing the Independence Day project, you wouldn't have to worry about Project 2025. We'd have our own power. But just like what you said earlier, Pat, black people don't want that because that's the long-term plan. That's the one that if we were to imply, put it together, that's the one that actually moves the needle and it actually preserves the future for black children. Nope, it's easier for black folk to go out there and vote for somebody who, when the teleprompter goes down, just starts spouting out the number 32.
And
You
it's
know what I'm
easier
saying?
to follow charlatans.
Right.
Who wear dashikis.
Especially 32 of them. Mm-hmm.
32.
No, but I've said this, and we've been talking about this, especially like when we're talking specifically the conscious community. But we're also talking about mindsets of the people who are part of the conscious community who come out, who are the descendants of the children of the civil rights movement, but also people who come out of the church. So that follower mind is already there. Those foundations are already set for them by the time they get to the conscious community. So that's why you see a community that's not really bearing any fruit, because people are not being honest about the conditioning that's still a part of them. Like some of these things, it's going to take real work for us to get over. Like, yeah, you may have a lot more knowledge about yourself and a lot more knowledge about African history and all these things here. But look at that. Look at your individual and the community's total actions and the fruit that we are bearing, right? So is it enough to just say, I learned my history or I know my history, to just say it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if that's just enough, then that's where we are and we've reached our goal. But if the goal is to actually, have something for ourselves, to be able to produce something, to be able to become a real nation of people, then we have to go past just, I know the history, and we have to go into, okay, now I know something, but how can I take action on what I know, or take action on
Joe?
Because that's that 35-year plan of actually building now, so tomorrow will be a better place. So because you can't just be a follower and you can't just be a collector of information. You have to actually have something tangible for people to benefit from.
No, you don't, Joe.
No, I'm gonna tell you what it is, man. A lot of these cats just want to, they're self-righteous and they just want to operate from a place of this lucid moral, lucid morality, where they say, well, when history shines on me, it's going to show I was on the right side of history, and I stood for this, stood for that.
It won't be remembered.
Yeah, and I'm like, man, that's BS. Because honestly speaking, if you're going to devote your life to this, then you got to come together with a plan that's going to win, and you have to be in it. And it's either win or not. There's no in between, and there's no second place. And that's my biggest issue with the so-called conscious sector, is that most of them just want to be the who's who of trivia in terms of Black history and so forth. How many books that I've read and this, that, and the other. And if you ever go back in time, the revolutionaries didn't turn a freaking page. So, my bad.
Yeah, too late.
They didn't turn a page in the book. They didn't, they just did what was spiritually within them, and they were driven. And so, not to say they didn't have any plans, they didn't figure it out, or so forth, but they weren't. They weren't out here trying to impress you with their catalogs and things of that nature.
True. That's a fact.
They didn't have tables full of shea butter and all this other stuff to sell and things of that nature. They didn't do any of those things. They laid their lives on the line for the future of their children. And we don't care about our children. And that's the bottom line. And I don't give a damn how emotional people get when they tell me, don't you say I don't care about my children. Your actions speak louder than your words.
Well, when we keep trying to integrate or assimilate further and further into white society, something that we see for a long term, we got enough evidence to see that integrating further and further into white society is not helping us. Because you're talking about these disasters, right? I was looking at a video today of them talking about the lack of rescue efforts in Asheville. The first thing popped in my mind was the bottleneck effect.
Mhm.
So, and also looking at the number of immigrants that's coming in, because FEMA says we don't have the money and the resources for you because the money and the resources are tied up at the border. But so if white America right now has the flu, then what do we have, right? Because it's even worse for us, right? Because you know, Pat, y'all, are there people still in your town with no lights?
I believe actually there are some rough area. They might have lights now, but I know that there were people when I got lights 6 days after they went out. There were still people that didn't have lights the next few days afterwards.
But it's the total dependency upon the same people who have showed us for 400-500 years that we are beneath them, that we will forever be their opposition. They will never see us as equals.
And the biggest issue, even with, because I know for those of you that live in cities and have never been without lights before, when a day is fine.
You feel like a Native American.
Yeah, after 4 or 5 days, it's different.
Yeah.
Because everything in your house is organic is now bad.
Yep.
And so now it's not even you're concerned about food and whatnot, but now you also have to contend with smells.
Yeah.
And so it like there are so many other little things that I hear people, especially when I go back to Charlotte, and they're like, man, I could be without lights. I was without lights for a couple of hours. It was like camping. Oh, I'm sure it was.
Right. Yeah, a couple hours. You ever been like 4 or 5 couple weeks? Because I remember hurricanes in the past that didn't directly hit Tallahassee, or the one that did hit Tallahassee, I think it was Cat 1 or something. People were out of power for like 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, and then you're talking about people not having running water either. So like that's a whole different ball game. And I know everybody know the trick where you can just pour water into the tub to make it flush into the toilet. Okay, where you gonna get the water to pour from? You know, so it gets to be this whole thing. And then the people that spent $300-400 buying groceries, the $500-600 buying groceries the day before the storm hit. And now all that's gone, and they got to replace all them groceries. So
that's why they pay to get non-perishables, but people keep getting perishables.
Right. And so I think it just you get into this space. But I think one of the challenges we face, again, is just a failure to critically think and critically assess where we're at and what we need to be doing. I do think that we have people that are capable of doing that, but I think they're not partnered up with the people that are. Because here's my thing, and I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna be quiet because we've been going for a minute. If you like to read books, and we've all said this before, that's fine. That's your lane. But understand that probably makes you a dark worker. There's no fame in that. And we could do a whole show on all the problems with trying to be on the right side of history. Because I'm sure that there were a lot of people in the 90s thinking that they was going to be on the right side of history when they was calling people F-bombs. And I don't mean the literal F-bomb. I mean the F-A word, right? Maggots, right? In 1990, you couldn't have told me that the things that are taboo nowadays would be taboo.
Right.
You could not. So, like the list of problems that come with you in the current day using modern sensibilities, trying to make a decision based on how you think culture is going to be, and even 10 years is ridiculous. But then, like the amount of arrogance present in that statement. I'm going to be on the right side of history, as if history is even going to remember you.
Hey, man, because you got to break down these barriers, man. You have to break down these barriers, and white people have to accept us. They have to accept us because we are black people. We are melanated people. We originate from the continent, bro.
White people have melanin too, but go ahead.
But look at our skin, bro, and look at what the sun do when it hit our skin, bro.
Oh, we glisten like diamonds.
Like it's pyramids, bro.
But
right,
The
So white
audacity,
people have to accept this.
the audacity to think that you would actually be in the history book is
Right.
boggling to me.
It is really like up there, right? Like, because even if you want to say, well, I'm gonna be a part of the push, you know who gets remembered when change happens? The person right at the tip of the spear. That ain't you.
Hey man, hey, history is, you can't try to make history. There are very few people who go out to try to make history and do it. When you're trying to be remembered, that's when you start to go awry, because that's when you're leading people to hell with that road, with that road full of what you would perceive as good intentions, but they're not good intentions in the end. They're not good intentions. They're not good actions or good outcomes, right?
Look,
and so,
no, I was gonna say this real quick, Joe, because I'm gonna let you cook, because you sound like you finna boil up, and I want to get you before the water get hot.
Too late.
Look, for all of you, right? One question for you. How many of y'all even remember your great-great-grandmother?
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, then you ain't old enough, right? But I mean, seriously though, like one of the main things that I got from this video is we don't want you all trying to force your way into our spaces, you black people. And we literally don't want you here, says the white people. They don't want us there. Now we're in a time where it's interesting that DEI is being done away with. I don't know. We didn't agree with the DEI stuff. A lot of the tactics and things that went into the supposed DEI, because it didn't work. It's dead. It was trash. It didn't work, right? But the idea of a America being the melting pot, like one of the things the Klansman said, if people are going to race mix, they have to let that happen organically. You can't force it. You can't force a group of people onto another group of people who don't want them there. They have to want to be around each other. And we've been trying to force ourselves into white America. Some of the biggest fallouts from us forcing ourselves into white America is we lost our will to survive. We lost our will to build ourselves up as a group of people, because we just said, forget this. White people enslaved us, so white people have to take care of us. And we forgot that we have to take care of ourselves. We forgot that as humans in a group of people, it's not on another group of people, especially your oppressor, to take care of you. And we believe that they do through the government that have to take care of us. Now, the same government that we are complaining about, but we refuse to take care of ourselves. But that comes from the mindsets that we have, and that comes from our experiences. And our experiences says we should depend on white people, and white people owe us something. They owe us something. We know they owe us something, but because they owe us something, they have to do it, and they have to do it our way, as if we're in the power position. And no, now, if we put ourselves in the power position, that'll be different. But we refuse to put ourselves in the power position because it's so comfortable just getting to tomorrow, because that 35-year plan is hard and it's rugged and it's cruel. But that's the plan that we need. So we're going to continue to go on that hamster wheel and go around and around and around and around and around until we choose to get off the wheel, because that's a choice at this point. We got enough information to understand the conditioning that has happened to us. If you don't understand it by now, that's a choice. Like, I'm sure all that stuff that came on social media, there are nuggets of information on social media that can lead people to studying this, to studying this, to studying this. Go to my website, ontheshoulders1.com. You can learn a whole lot, right? But hey, it's a choice, and it's going to be the choice that we make to either get better or remain where we are. PaxInc.org, thepax.org. Make sure you check out the website, thepax.org, fatlifestation.com, fatlifestation.com. I said it in this order now. Y'all can go on over and watch PC Show Without Technical Ted. saying something this week. So y'all do that. I'm Joseph Ward. We'll catch y'all on the other side.